The United States is growing, but barely. Population numbers are stagnating in New York, California, and Chicago, the old ports of call for immigrants. Instead, people are flocking to the south and to the west. To the south sits the Sun Belt, running east to west across the American South. To the west is the Intermountain West, running north to south just east of the Rocky Mountains. Both regions have experienced tremendous growth in the last few decades. These two regions overlap in the states of Arizona, where its capital, Phoenix, has experienced tremendous growth since World War II. It is now the fifth largest city in the country with 1.6 million people, behind only Houston, Chicago, Los Angeles, and New York. But the growth of Arizona is even more impressive when compared to its next-door neighbor, New Mexico, which has had a much harder time, losing millions of people to its economically stronger neighbors. The United States has long been one of the most mobile countries in the world, meaning that the rate of migration within the country by permanent residents and citizens is very high. But these rates have recently decreased, with fewer Americans moving in 2019 than any year since 1947. There was a small uptick in 2020 and 2021, though, with the COVID-19 pandemic leading many to move from highly populated cities to more rural areas. And as the population of New Mexico, along with states like California, New York, and Illinois, have declined, other states like Texas, Florida, North Carolina, and Arizona have seen gains. But if Arizona and New Mexico are largely similar in geography, climate, and location, then why are people choosing one over the other? Let's explore the reasons why and try to make sense of why people are moving to Arizona, but not New Mexico. First, some background information you need to know to understand the Grand Canyon State. At 113,998 square miles, Arizona is the sixth largest state by size, and for over a century, it has attracted tourists to the vast Sonoran Desert, with its picturesque landscape dotted with saguaro cacti, home to rattlesnakes and scorpions. In fact, Arizona has the most venomous species outside Australia, but that's probably not what's inducing so many people to move there. It also has dense forests of spruce and pine, and you can even ski in the north near the high-elevation city of Flagstaff. But it's that dry desert heat Arizona was first known for. With its mild winters and an estimated 300 days of sun each year, it became a destination in the early 20th century for people suffering from asthma and tuberculosis. This made it an attractive destination for the older Americans who continue to pour in to this day, and who contributed so much to Arizona's population growth in the decades after World War II. The city of Phoenix dominates the state. It's both the capital and biggest city by far, and has been described as a testament to man's hubris, stubbornly bringing life to an inhospitable landscape. But by some measures, Phoenix has been an urban center for more than 1,000 years. Before the arrival of Europeans, it was one of the most densely populated parts of North America, inhabited by the Hohokam, who called the area Snaketown in their own language. The Hohokam built some 135 miles of canals that made the area inhabitable, even green. When the American city of Phoenix was founded in 1867, the canals were revitalized. And so the city was named after the immortal mythological bird, from the way the city rose from the ashes of the Hohokam civilization. Humans first arrived in the Salt River Valley some 10,000 years ago, following big game, bison, mammoths, and ground sloths. By 8,000 years ago, they were practicing some form of agriculture. By 3,500 years ago, they had imported the cultivation of maize from the great civilizations of Mesoamerica, which truly made life in the Salt River Valley sustainable. 2,000 years ago saw the arrival of groups like the Mogollon, the Sinawa, and the ancestral Puebloans, sometimes referred to as the Anasazi. But by the time the Spanish arrived, the Hohokam civilization was no more. A 300-year drought, beginning in the 12th century, had led to mass social upheaval and civilizational collapse. The Spanish were led to the region by Coronado, who had heard from the Aztec tales of a great civilization rich in gold, El Dorado. But the Spanish found instead the ashes of the Hohokam culture, and the people who had taken their place, the Apache and Navajo, were relative newcomers to the region. Among the Spanish were the Jesuit priests, who founded missions across Spanish America, converting the natives to Catholicism. When Mexico gained its independence from Spain in 1821, the area became part of Nueva California. also known as Alta or Upper California. But this part of independent Mexico lasted less than 30 years. The conclusion of the Mexican-American War in 1848 brought to the United States the land north of the Gila River to be administered jointly under the name New Mexico. The final touches came a few years later with the brokering of the Gadsden Purchase. Powerful railroad interests, represented by Lieutenant James Gadsden, wanted to build a southern branch of the Transcontinental Railroad far enough south that they could bypass the Rocky Mountains to the north. To do so, they needed the U.S. to acquire from Mexico the thin strip of land south of the Gila River. The administration of President Franklin Pierce completed the Gadsden Purchase in 1853, and with this, the acquisition of the continental United States was complete, although it would be more than 50 years before all territories had achieved statehood. In 1867, the territory was divided in half, New Mexico in the east and Arizona to the west. Prospectors poured in, hoping to duplicate the windfall of the California gold rush 20 years earlier and of Silver City, Nevada a decade earlier. In the north, Mormons trickled down from Utah and founded the city of Mesa, while the area acquired in the Gadsden Purchase became the site of the Butterfield Stage Trail, where covered wagons trudged their way across the landscape towards Southern California. But the influx of money brought with it cattle rustlers and stagecoach and train robbers. Arizona became the ultimate symbol of the Old West in towns like Tombstone, home of Doc Holliday, Wyatt Earp, and the OK Corral. A series of gold and silver rushes led to boom towns, and their swift abandonment, after veins ran dry, led to ghost towns. Some of those hoping to get rich from gold or silver found they could make a decent living panning for copper. The economy was dependent on the 5 C's: copper, cotton, cattle, citrus, and climate, meaning tourism. By the 1890s, Phoenix had become a railroad hub for goods shipped from the West Coast on their way back to East. Its dry weather made it a destination for the chronically unwell, and numerous sanitariums were founded. Like other far-flung territories, the state depended heavily on federal dollars for infrastructure projects. Still, efforts to make Arizona a state failed. Whereas California had gained statehood in 1850, just 2 years after its acquisition, similar efforts for Arizona and New Mexico were waylaid by the perception of the region as alien territory full of Indians and Spanish speakers. Finally, in 1912, New Mexico became the 47th state, followed a few months later by Arizona, which became the 48th and last state in the continental United States. Historians have described the early days of the Southwest using terms like internal colonialism, where resources were extracted from the ground to be processed in eastern factories or sold in eastern markets. The value of the land was dependent on what people back east would pay for its products. But there were early signs that Arizona would not remain an undeveloped backwater. In 1929, Arizona saw the founding of Sky Harbor Airport, getting in early on passenger planes and establishing the state as an important site for military aviation, while the Roosevelt Dam was completed in 1911 and increased the water available to the growing community. During the Depression, the Southwest was further devastated by the Dust Bowl, and federal spending increased accordingly. These years saw the building of the Hoover Dam, which competed for tourists with the Grand Canyon, and Arizona now boasted 2 world wonders, one natural and one man-made. Its remote location made it ideal for military installations during World War II, POW camps holding German soldiers, internment camps for Japanese immigrants, as well as American citizens of Japanese descent. For the Air Force, the Southwest was ideal for its large tracts of open land and clear skies that made for good flying weather year-round. World War II made Americans far more mobile. Soldiers stationed around the country had gotten a taste of life outside their small Midwest towns or their crowded East Coast cities. After the war, soldiers who had been stationed in Arizona returned to settle down, put down roots, and start businesses and families. The GI Bill meant millions of veterans could afford mortgages. The invention of air conditioning made it comfortable to settle in places in which few had the constitution to live before. The growing labor pool in Arizona attracted businesses like Motorola, Goodyear, and IBM, military and aeronautics contractors, and even the first McDonald's franchise in 1953. America was undergoing a process of suburbanization, where every family wanted a detached home and a driveway with an automobile. The undeveloped land of the Southwest was ideal to accommodate this dream of spreading out, and Phoenix responded with policies that made it even cheaper to build around the fringes of the city. A culture newly reliant on the automobile depended on federal projects like the Eisenhower Interstate to get around. At the same time, a large population put renewed stress on the water supply, making it more difficult to earn a living through agriculture. Throughout these years, Phoenix remained firmly segregated. Under the 1965 Voting Rights Act, Arizona was the only state outside the traditional Southeast singled out for election monitoring. When the San Francisco Giants came for spring training, even Willie Mays had difficulty finding a place to rent. The influx of veterans changed the political orientation of the state too. Previously, it had been solidly Democratic. Now, farm boys from states like Ohio flipped the state to being reliably Republican, while the technology companies that had moved in attracted engineers and skilled workers who saw no need for organized labor. Much of the credit for this political shift can also be given to Barry Goldwater, author of The Conscience of a Conservative and the 1964 Republican candidate for president. Although Goldwater became famous nationally as an uncompromising right-wing voice, as the figurehead of the Republican Party in his own state, he backed moderate candidates who tried to appeal to people on both sides of the aisle. As the country moved deeper into the 1960s, Arizona became a hub for retirees looking to spend their golden years somewhere cheap and warm. Sun City, founded on the site of a former ghost town, was the first intentional community of this type, building detached units and amenities attractive to retirees who wanted a community, but not a nursing home. Today, Sun City is home to almost 40,000 people. From 1970 to 2000, the population of the United States as a whole grew by only 38%. But during this same period, Arizona grew by 190%, nearly tripling in population. Although the Sun Belt technically stretches across the southern United States, the term became most closely identified with the Southwest, with Arizona as its lodestar. Arizona grew at first by touting its relatively low cost of living, and it continues to enact pro-growth policies that encourage housing construction and the founding of new businesses. Although the state was hit hard by the 2008 subprime mortgage crisis, its growth has only accelerated in the years since. The state was 8th in growth by percentage from 2010 to 2019, increasing its population by 13.9%, but they were number 1 from 2019 to 2020. During the 2020 coronavirus pandemic, half of all cities in the U.S. with more than 50,000 people lost population, but none of Arizona's did. Of the 10 biggest cities in the country, only Phoenix and San Antonio actually gained population during this period. All other cities in the top 10 lost people, with New York topping the list at losing more than 300,000 people. For Phoenix, the growth has been even more pronounced. The 2020 census showed that between 2010 and 2020, it had grown from 1.4 million to 1.6 million people, making it the fastest growing city in the country and surpassing Philadelphia as the nation's 5th largest. Phoenix sits in Maricopa County, which is the 4th largest county in the country, as well as the fastest growing, adding 130,000 people since just 2020. But Arizona also has one of the largest racial demographic gaps in the country. This means that while the state's older generations, X and Boomers, are 67% white, the youngest generation, Zoomers and Alpha, are only 40% white. While Arizona is currently 30% Hispanic, that number only looks to be going up, with a significantly greater share among the younger generations. Like the rest of the country, the state has an aging population exacerbated by Arizona's appeal to retirees. In 1960, 36% of residents were under 18. By 2021, only 22% were. Arthur C. Nelson is a professor of planning and real estate development at the University of Arizona and has said that in the next few decades, 90% of the population growth in Phoenix will be non-white. Arizona's economy was hit especially hard by the 2008 mortgage crisis. The median home price sank from $262,000 to $150,000, and in some places, new home construction fell by 75%. Some economists refer to states like Arizona as the sand states, and pointed out that one of the reasons they were suffering so badly was because they had depended so much on housing construction. When the bubble burst, the Sand States saw high delinquency rates, massive foreclosures, and a resulting economic depression. The 2008 crisis forced Arizona to reassess its strengths and take steps to turn things around. As much of the country turned away from manufacturing and towards a service-based economy, Arizona followed suit, and skilled jobs increased 18% from 2015 to 2019, with firms like Avnet and Insight attracting white-collar workers alongside traditionally heavy hitters like Intel and Motorola. And the state added more than 100,000 jobs in 2022, 86,000 of them in the Phoenix metropolitan area. But at the same time, Arizona continues to export agricultural products like lettuce, spinach, broccoli, cantaloupe, and watermelon, but with water use tightly managed. Arizona has gained a reputation as a haven for senior citizens looking to escape harsh winters. Those who stay just for the winter are known as snowbirds, and every year, more than 300,000 of them descend on Phoenix. For retirees who decide to make the move year-round, Arizona offers major benefits, like zero tax on Social Security income and no gift, estate, or inheritance taxes. With many retirees seeking a community of similarly aged adults, Arizona has had the advantage of having gotten in on the ground floor, and with the significant population of retirees to begin with, more continue to pour in. And those retirees can make a tremendous impact on local economies. Researchers at the University of South Carolina estimated that a 5% increase in the number of retirees there would result in more than $100 million added to the state economy. Growing Arizona communities want to attract both eds and meds, though. That is, students with higher education resources and retirees with world-class medical facilities. Things might be changing in Arizona, though. Although the state turned solidly red after World War II, that trend has actually reversed in recent years. To a lot of people, the name Maricopa County brings to mind Sheriff Joe Arpaio, who gained infamy as the mastermind of Tent City, an outdoor prison camp constructed by the inmates themselves, where detainees are outfitted in pink in order to humiliate them. The state's reputation for conservatism was well earned. Arizona voted for the Republican candidate in every presidential election from 1952 to 1992, and again from 2000 to 2016. Those years closely track the career of previously mentioned politician Barry Goldwater, who was senator from 1953 to 1987, with a break in the mid-60s during his bid for the presidency. Staunchly libertarian, Goldwater actually opposed the Republican Party's capture by the religious right. John McCain was Goldwater's successor in the Senate. He credited Goldwater as the man who transformed the Republican Party from an Eastern elitist organization to the breeding ground for the election of Ronald Reagan. Electorally, as in so much else, Arizona is dominated by Phoenix and Maricopa County, which accounts for about 60% of votes cast in the state. For years, Maricopa County leaned right, and so did the state. The tide began to turn during the 2018 midterm elections, with the election of Democrat Kyrsten Sinema, though she'd eventually change her affiliation to independent, followed by the state pulling for Biden in 2020. But while Maricopa County as a whole is increasingly voting Democrat, Phoenix's East Valley will likely remain solidly Republican given its large number of Mormons and baby boomer retirees with roots in the Midwest. Whereas many states find their most liberal voters in their most densely populated areas, Arizona's most liberal areas can be found at its periphery, among the Indian reservations, in its smaller cities like Flagstaff, which have large numbers of students, and Sedona, with its artists' enclaves. While Arizona is the most visible member of the Sun Belt, it's also part of the Intermountain West, while the state's running north to south directly east of the Rocky Mountains. And like the Sun Belt, the Intermountain West has experienced tremendous growth in the last few decades. The Intermountain West dominates the list of fastest-growing states. Idaho had the largest population growth by percentage in 2021, followed by Utah, Montana, and Arizona. The places people left were once some of the premier destinations in the U.S. New York, Illinois, California, and Hawaii. And it's tempting to think that most people moving to states like Idaho are doing so for the wide open spaces. But even here, most of the growth is to urban areas, just smaller, more affordable urban areas than the ones they're leaving. There is something very, very important to remember though, and that's population typically grows in 3 ways. 1. Natural increase, that is, births over deaths. 2. Immigration from abroad. And 3. Domestic immigration from within. Traditional ports of entry for immigrants from overseas, like New York and California, depend on foreign immigration to maintain their modest growth. When we look at domestic migration alone, it's clear that Americans are moving out of traditional population centers in favor of states like Arizona, Texas, and Florida. Of these 3 factors of population growth, domestic migration is the most dynamic, sensitive to minute economic changes. In contrast, foreign migrants are slower to change destinations as they generally seek to move to established immigrant enclaves in states like New York and California. In both types of immigration, the people moving tend to be bimodal. That is, people who leave their homes behind tend to be one of 2 things, either very desperate and often with limited formal education, or they tend to be more educated than the average person, with the assurance of finding economic opportunity wherever they go. Migrants can also be divided into 2 groups this way. Contracted migrants move with a job already secured. Speculative migrants leave home with the belief that wherever they end up, that it can't be any worse than where they are. Traditional immigration destinations like New York and California play a pivotal role by attracting migrants from great distances and then sending them out a shorter distance to the states nearby. Take California, for example. It attracts migrants from the East Coast, Midwest, and abroad, and then sends them to nearby states like Arizona years or decades later. Much of the growth in Arizona has been in the towns abutting metro areas like Phoenix, and scholars have coined the term boomburg to refer to cities of more than 100,000 people that have experienced at least 10% growth in each of the last 3 decades. The Phoenix metro area alone includes 8 cities of 100,000 or more people, and the largest boomburgs now have a higher population than cities like St. Louis or Pittsburgh. Arizona is home to boomburgs like Buckeye and Queen Creek, places that are close enough to commute into the city, but where housing is still affordable. Buckeye is an extreme example. It grew from a town of 6,500 in 2000 to more than 110,000 today. But while so far this has been the story of Arizona's tremendous growth in population, which in reality is the story of the Phoenix metro area's population boom, Arizona has a next-door neighbor who has not been faring as well. Once, Arizona and New Mexico were part of the same territory acquired by the United States from Mexico. But where Arizona has found a way to transcend its arid reputation, New Mexico has found itself left in the dust. In fact, from 2010 to 2017, New Mexico actually experienced negative net migration, losing about 28,000 people. To make things worse, the people leaving tend to be college-educated and seeking white-collar opportunities available in neighboring states, with the most popular destination for people leaving New Mexico being Denver. New Mexico is slightly larger than Arizona at 121,590 square miles, making it the 5th largest state by size. But it's only the 45th by population at around 2.1 million people, averaging just 17 people per square mile. And of the state's 33 counties, 32 of them are officially classified as rural. The southern portion of the state is dominated by the Chihuahuan Desert, which is the largest desert in North America. And that large desert, combined with the low population density, makes New Mexico's southern border an especially attractive spot for smuggling, whether bringing in illegal substances or people. But before we look into reasons for New Mexico's population problem, what should be made clear is that New Mexico is not suffering on account of its weather. In fact, its high elevation means that it tends to have summer temperatures that are far more manageable than those of Arizona. New Mexico's largest city is Albuquerque, but its capital is Santa Fe, which was founded by Spanish conquistadors in 1610, and is the oldest city in the U.S. that serves as a state capital. The United States won most of the state in the Mexican-American War, but the area remained a backcountry, and General William Tecumseh Sherman even once said, "The United States ought to declare war on Mexico and make it take back New Mexico." New Mexico achieved statehood in January 1912, just months before Arizona, and the 2 states were seemingly bound together. with both serving as sources of natural resources to enrich entrepreneurs back east. But while Arizona was able to transcend this status, New Mexico struggled to break free. It seemed as though it suffered from a curse, a resource curse. In the 1950s, economists noticed an inverse relationship between economic success and natural resources. Resource-poor countries like Israel, Switzerland, and Japan were growing richer, while areas like Mexico and West Virginia experienced chronic poverty, and economists called this phenomenon the resource curse. Upon further study, it was theorized that the problem was not due to specialization in natural resources, but specialization itself, which tended to blind people to other opportunities and cause places to underinvest in resources that would lead to growth, like education. Within the United States, regions supplying resources were treated almost as if they were colonial possessions, with outsiders stripping the area of its raw materials and sending the wealth gained from them to other states. But then a strange historical turn would actually briefly reverse this trend. In 1921, Robert Oppenheimer was a college student suffering from dysentery. Like so many others, he headed to the New Mexican desert in hopes that the dry air would soothe his symptoms. Oppenheimer found the warm weather so pleasing that he returned throughout the years. When the government was seeking a place to develop the atomic bomb during World War II, Oppenheimer suggested New Mexico. Ultimately, the U.S. deemed it necessary to take over some 54,000 acres for the Los Alamos laboratory. In a happy coincidence, New Mexico was also the source for much of the yellowcake uranium necessary for the project. On July 16, 1945, the world's first atomic bomb exploded in the New Mexico desert. Immediately after World War II, the Cold War meant that research continued at Los Alamos at a frantic pace. The influx of scientists and government money transformed the state. Albuquerque went from a population of about 70,000 in 1940 to over 200,000 by 1960. During the 1950s, the city boasted more PhDs per capita than any in the U.S. By 1980, only 1 inhabitant in 5 had been born in the city, and 40% had lived there fewer than 5 years. New Mexico's atomic legacy continues in its laboratories, waste disposal sites, and nuclear weapon storage. But for people uninvolved in nuclear research, there were good reasons to stay away. In 1986, documents recovered via the Freedom of Information Act revealed numerous incidents of what are called broken arrows. That is, nuclear warheads lost and never recovered. The documents detailed an incident in 1957 when a B-36 bomber had accidentally dropped a 10-megaton hydrogen bomb on land owned by the University of Mexico. The accompanying explosives, although thankfully not the nuclear device itself, had detonated, leaving a crater 25 feet deep. As the decades progressed, the efforts of long-term exposure to even trace amounts of radiation became apparent. The most famous examples was at Pueblo Canyon, also known as Acid Canyon. It had been used as a dumping site by the Los Alamos laboratory until 1964. After the site was cleaned, officials insisted radiation levels were below the threshold to be worried about, and the area was reopened to hikers. Only in 2008, during a wrongful death lawsuit, did the University of California finally admit to using the site as a dumping ground for radioactive liquid waste. And there are countless more stories like this, mistakes made and acknowledged only decades under legal pressure. Whole families developed rare forms of cancer. For the people involved, known as downwinders, it was often too late to save their own lives. The information could only be used to help others and to get victims some degree of justice. New Mexico's experience in nuclear energy typifies the resource curse. The industry boomed from the 1940s through the 1970s as the United States faced a world war and a red menace, along with the 1970s energy crisis. During the 1980s, the desire for energy independence lessened. In its place arose a suspicion towards nuclear energy fueled by the Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island disasters. In 2008, revenue from fossil fuel-related industries accounted for a third of New Mexico's state revenue. In many ways, New Mexico continues to what historian Gerald Nash described as America's Third World, with a colonial economy based on extraction of natural resources. When the rest of the country's desires change, New Mexico scrambles for a new resource to supply. But while New Mexico has developed itself as a technology hub outside its atomic facilities, touting itself as an emerging alternative to Silicon Valley, as so often happens, the profits made in New Mexico are often made by outsiders and soon moved out of state. The 2020 census showed a poverty rate of 18.2%, the third highest in the country. In 2022, New Mexico received $3.69 for every dollar of tax revenue it paid, the highest in the country above West Virginia and Mississippi. New Mexico is a land of highs and lows. Amid the grinding poverty, it boasts Spaceport America, the world's first purpose-built commercial spaceport, owned and operated by the state and launching rockets for companies like Virgin Galactic, among others. Today, New Mexico is one of only 6 majority-minority states where white residents make up less than 50% of the state's population. It has the country's highest proportion of residents with Hispanic ancestry at 49% and the second highest proportion of Native Americans after Alaska. 77% of children attending public school are non-white and 75% qualify for subsidized meals. In 2018, New Mexico's high school seniors were ranked 50th in the country for college readiness in terms of standardized test scores, although it should be noted Arizona was ranked 48th. As a low-density state, New Mexico suffers from the same afflictions as rural areas around the nation: obesity, diabetes, and addiction, where deaths from alcohol are 140% higher than the national average. While Arizona and New Mexico have experienced stark differences in domestic migration, they are also uniquely bound together by history and geography. What's more, they are flanked on either side by 2 population giants, California and Texas, the number 1 and 2 most populous states in the country, respectively. California and Texas represent diametrically opposed approaches to politics, to economic regulation, and the role of the state in ensuring property, and it is the loss from one of these states that is helping to bolster the population numbers of Arizona. Celebrities like Joe Rogan and businessmen like Elon Musk have made well-publicized moves from California to Texas in order to avoid California's tax burden. This has been hailed as a sign of California's decline, a kind of reverse grapes of wrath, with Californians pushed off the land by onerous taxes and an exorbitant cost of living. The 2020 census showed that in 10 years, California had lost some 70,000 residents, shrinking by 0.7%. It was the state's first population reduction since at least 1900. Congressional seats are readjusted after each census, and in 2020, for the first time ever, California actually lost a seat. There is a metric called regional price parities, or RPP, which measures relative purchasing power. California's RPP is 116.4, which means prices are generally 16% above the U.S. average. The RPP includes consumer goods and services as well as home prices, and only Hawaii's cost of living is higher than California, while Arizona's is towards the middle of the pack. Commercial energy costs in California are similarly inflated. Only Alaska and Hawaii are more expensive, and they have the excuse of not being connected to the rest of the country. The cost of housing in California can also be prohibitively expensive. The state has some of the highest housing costs in the country, and 37% of residents say that they have considered leaving the state due to the cost of housing. A metric called the median multiple divides the median home price by the median household income. When broken down by city, places like Los Angeles and San Francisco are towards the bottom of the list, with home prices far more expensive than the median income. But again, Phoenix is towards the middle. The cities with the most affordable housing relative to income are places like Pittsburgh, Rochester, and Buffalo, the old Rust Belt cities, which are now starting to get back on their feet. By this metric, California may actually be somewhat of a peek into the future of Arizona. Both states developed in a pattern of sprawl dependent on the automobile. With such low density, further development pushes people farther and farther away from the urban core, making commuting times untenable. Arizona claims 17% of all people leaving California, and it's estimated that 20 to 25% of people moving to the Phoenix area come from California. If destination is broken down by county, then Clark County, Nevada is the most frequent destination for people leaving California, followed by Maricopa County, Arizona. But it's important to look at who is leaving California. Some have argued that it's the state's most productive members who are leaving, driven away by high income taxes. But it seems like actually the opposite is taking place. In fact, it's lower and middle income adults who have been pushed out by California's high cost of living. Meanwhile, California continues to attract younger people with higher incomes and educational attainment. What is true, though, is that some business leaders are getting sick of California's regulatory framework. A report from the Hoover Institute notes California's stricter-than-average overtime laws and the ease with which employees are able to file lawsuits against their employer. It bemoans the bureaucratic red tape that slows down the process of opening a fast food franchise. The Hoover Institute notes that 272 companies moved their headquarters out of California between 2018 and 2021. The most popular destination was Texas, followed by Arizona and Nevada. So while it isn't the average rich that are leaving California for states like Texas and Arizona, some of the ultra-rich are. And it should be noted that any billionaires like Elon Musk leaving the state do have an outsized effect on the economy, since in California, the top 0.5% of taxpayers account for around 40% of state income tax revenue. It's clear that while Arizona is no longer a low cost of living state, especially in cities like Phoenix, its proximity to even higher cost of living regions like Southern California make it an appealing escape hatch for people priced out of their communities. New Mexico, on the other hand, has done little to make itself appealing as an urban alternative. Much of the difference comes down to who got in on the ground floor, though. Developers in Arizona saw the potential in catering to retirees and the benefits of a diverse, service-based economy, while New Mexico has found itself trapped by the resource curse. When we look to the future, it's easy to predict the past repeating itself. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And for Arizona and New Mexico, once combined into a single territory, their paths will likely continue to diverge.